Happy Monday, my Liberty kitty cats. And before we get into today's awesome conversation, if I do say so myself, I got to make sure that you know you could have already seen it. You could have already heard it. You could have seen it live as it happened. You could have even tossed some questions, some comments out there. You could have done all of this if only you had been a member of the Lions of Liberty Pride, if you were one of our many amazing supporters on Patreon who fully fund this show, who help us grow this program. You can find more about that over at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty, but we really have something for everybody. You can get ad spots on this program. You can produce an episode. You can get discounts on merchandise, monthly calls with the hosts of Lions of Liberty. We really go out of our way to make sure you get value for contributing to us and helping us grow this platform. Not to mention all sorts of bonus audio and video content. Like I said, we have live streams of many of my interviews. We also have bonus shows, bonus segments with guests, shows like Conspiracy Corner, Degenerate Gamblers, Brian McWilliams on his Good Morning Fuckhead, his nearly daily show. You really don't want to be missing all the great content behind the paywall. Check it out at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty.
We need to empower people with not just the philosophical tools, but the inspiration to break free from the system.
Welcome to the flagship Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly dose of education, inspiration, and real-world application from the top minds in the liberty movement.
If you want liberty, we need to be better leaders, better husbands, better fathers, better friends, better businessmen. We need to be better people.
Here's your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Marc Claire.
Live long and live free.
All right, kitty cats, I am here today with someone that, well, look, I cross-pollinate. We're all friends here in the Libertarian podcast world. My friend Pete, he beat me to this guy. I wanted to have him on. Next thing I know, he's on Pete's show. So I do recommend actually going back and listening to Pete's interview with my guest today, too. I think this is a really big, complex topic we're discussing today. So I think they'll be able to serve as a good 1-2 punch with our different approaches. But I am very pleased to welcome the host of the Popular Liberty YouTube channel, as well as he is the administrator of the Part of the Problem Inner Circle on MeWe, the rebirth Part of the Problem Inner Circle from another podcast friend, Dave Smith. I'm pleased to welcome Andrew from Popular Liberty. Andrew, are you ready to roar?
You mean like Scar?
Just like Scar.
I feel like that's what I'm here for today, that Uncle Scar is about to come tell all the Simbas about what Mufasa didn't tell them about the northern part of the kingdom.
Would you call it, are you the Scar of the Liberty movement then? Is that kind of how you're seeing yourself? Are you saying Scar was really the good guy? How deep are we going to
No, it's the, no, I feel like that's the way it's going to come across. But, this concept of archotropism, it's, a lot of people take it as a argument for menarchy. And, I'm not making it any ought arguments. I'm making an is argument that this is, in fact, something that exists and is something that we have to figure out how to deal with, because we haven't figured out how to deal with it yet. And the fact we haven't is why we're losing.
So this concept, and it is, again, it's called archotropism, not anarchotropism. I know we're going to hear the archo and everyone wants to put the anarchy in there because we're all libertarians. We all have that on our minds. We're going to dig into that a little bit. I know there's a lot of points to cover, but first time here, Andrew, I do want to get to know you just a little bit first. So why don't we just dive in? Just give us a little bit of your background. I know you come from kind of that engineering, computer programming mindset background, but how did this all merge with the ideas of liberty, with this whole crazy world we're involved in here? And I'll let you tell the tale, but I think it's pretty interesting how you sort of came upon this idea.
Yeah, well, I came to liberty like a different way. I came through like the biblical route, and I didn't come to it by, Ron Paul or reading Rothbard or anything like that, because I was too young at the time when Ron Paul was doing his thing and being amazing. And I only kind of found out after the fact. But, I basically, by 2017, I had kind of come to the idea, okay, I know I'm a libertarian. I know I kind of believe in this not aggression principle thing, or the silver rule as it was in the Bible. And and that was kind of what, I had already kind of gotten there, and I had already, come to a lot of conclusions about how the world worked. And, as a programmer, as my job back then, the thing I always noticed, I always had like a strong science background too, like, and just a fascination with it. And it's like I always took a lot of time to study a lot of different types of science as a as a hobby. It's not, not as a discipline, but as a hobby. But or I should say, not as a profession, but as a hobby. And I had noticed one thing after another, that a whole lot of the problems with the state, they seem to almost, and the left too. It's like they always seem to like mimic thermodynamics, and and this was something I just kept noticing it over and over and over again. And even like when I read The Art of War for the first time, it's like I couldn't help but see, this is talking about consolidating power, and how to things like concentrating your forces and trying to divide your opponents, and I just kept noticing these thermodynamics principles about, and eventually it kind of hit me that all of the after listening to kind of Dave Smith talk about the state, I found him in like 2018 or 2019, somewhere around there, and just listening to him, and then finally like reading Rothbard, and reading a little bit of Mises, and it just hit me that, this really is all based on thermodynamics. It's a mixture. The rules of power are a mixture of thermodynamics and economics, and this is where I got the Archotropism framework. And the way this this marriage of kind of economics and thermodynamics manifests itself is in this this chaos order power cycle, where the state, well, at least in democracies, not quite true in an Anarcho Covenant or a monarchy, is that the state will try to like in a democracy, it will try to deliberately try to create chaos in order to be the one to extract the order from it later, and derive power from that. And because what ends up happening, you become the state becomes the owner of that new order. You become the thing keeping people safe. And this is kind of similar. Comes from George Soros's law of reflexivity, which basically states that you end up creating what you fear through something that a process that I call pseudo demand. And what that means is it kind of mimics demand. So if you remember that people always behave their incentives, not their ideals, and then they'll kind of use their ideals to rationalize that whatever incentives they choose to follow. And what ends up happening with this law of reflexivity, and you end up creating what you fear, the way that usually works is that, because like if the state comes and threatens me, that's the action. The action is to threaten me. I end up paying them because, and basically what it ends up being is, it's almost as if I have a demand to be threatened. And, it's instead of like, the way I have demand for food, and so the market supplies food, I have a pseudo demand to be threatened, and therefore I pay for a supply of threats to my person and self. And this ends up being a perverse incentive that ends up being like kind of the basis for why we have a state, is that there is value in being threatened. People are willing to pay people to threaten them.
I'm just going to butt in because anytime I'm trying to do the most, I've heard you talk about this a lot, so I think I kind of understand some things, but I want to come from the most layman's approach possible. So anything that I kind of think of, I'm going to kind of jump in and try to get you to clarify. So can you kind of clarify that idea of the demand to be threatened? Like, where do you see that demand coming from?
Oh, like it's basically it exists. And therefore, because you have two things. One is that power is valuable. I make two assumptions in archotropism. One is that power is valuable, and the second assumption is that hierarchy is inevitable. And so, in other words, if I just any kind of power, criminality or a statecraft, which by the way, same thing. I agree that the state is a mafia pretending it's a human rights organization. There's no. It's like I'm not saying the state's a good thing here, But because this thing is profitable, people are willing to pay you if you threaten them, or you threaten force against them. As far as the market's concerned, there's.
Are you saying that demand comes from like society then, sort of? Demand comes from others.
Well, I call it pseudo demand.
Okay.
Because it's not real demand. It's like I'm not. I don't want to be threatened, but because I'm willing to pay, someone who threatens me, the market's. From the market's point of view, there is no difference.
Okay.
But I'm willing to pay someone for food. I'm willing to pay someone for threats. And I mean, from the
I guess the point is it's proven by your actions and my actions too, because I pay my taxes too. Why? Because I'm threatened. So if I wasn't threatened, I wouldn't pay those taxes. At least not. Maybe if they were set up in another way, I would. But
and if you were strong enough to repel them, you wouldn't pay them. If you were in like a position where they couldn't get to you, you wouldn't pay them because you weren't afraid. And it's like if you're out living off the grid in the middle of nowhere and you're just kind of doing your own thing, they don't know where you are, and you know that they don't know where you are. It's like you're not going to pay them because you don't need to. And I mean, their threats are meaningless because they don't know where you are. And it's a real perverse incentive of reality. And again, people behave their incentives and then rationalize them backwards. So what ends up happening is that people will have this thing. They about half the country right now, they see that it is profitable to be part of the state somehow, and and they will find reasons, good or bad or whatever, to get stuff out of it, out of this aggression. And so like like the bottom 80%, it's like the top 20% pay like 95% of all the net taxes. It's like they're the only net taxpayers. Everybody else is like free rider. The bottom, like 80% of America is like all free riders or something like that. And so what it ends up and people will find reasons for it. They'll say, oh, we need education or military defense or police and roads and bridges, and like they'll find any number of reasons to rationalize this thing backwards. But the incentive is that, hey, if someone is basically what the state ends up providing to their voters or to their clients, so to speak, is aggression as a service. There's that, hey, we are a hierarchy that is specialized for statecraft, for providing aggression as a service to you. And if you pay us in terms of support or however in votes, because I guess that's the system we're in right now, is votes. If you pay us for that, we'll go aggress against people and get you value for it. And maybe you're not getting as much value back as you think you should or whatever. But or if you're a libertarian, you don't want any at all. But hey, a lot of people they look at that and say, I'm subjectively in my own. Remember, value is subjective. It's like they will say, hey, I'm getting more back than I'm paying for it. Maybe I think I should get a better deal on it, but I'm getting value. And now if you're one of the top 20% net taxpayers, well, I'm sorry, you're screwed. And you're kind of out of luck there. But yeah, this incentive, it exists, and people will just rationalize any number of reasons for them to be allowed to partake in it. And this is kind of the basis for archotropism, that a state can take advantage of this, because basically what it is hey, we want an aggressive order as a service. If you say you believe in like defense, libertarians believe in defensive force. Well, the way that kind of gets perverted is that, well, the best defense is a good offense. And so therefore you have, if you want a defensive order, well, the best kind of defensive order is an offensive order, which is aggressive, unfortunately. And this is one thing you'll see in so basically the market ends up supplying people an aggressive order. It's just like that, because people want it, and it's profitable to them, and because it is profitable, they'll find a reason to make it okay morally or whatever.
And if you see that as sort of a law of nature, if you will, does that sort of imply that even if we could magically snap our fingers tonight and just end the state or what have you, that tomorrow that state would rebuild because that demand in our society would remain? So it would just take maybe another form, or maybe even almost the same form.
Well, this is why it ends up getting to be mistaken as an argument for minarchy. And again, I'm not making an argument for, we should have a minarchist state. I'm saying that, this is the reason why we have one in the first place. And this is not why what I'm going to be talking about today is not why we need a state, it's why we have one in the first place.
Gotcha.
And so, if we had that magical button that, if you press it so hard, would your finger get a blister? It's like, yeah, of course I would still press it, but It's like, the people, you have to recognize that the people are still incentivized to have this thing here. And they will, and because of that incentive exists and it's not going away, then, and there are ways to make it go away. And we can talk about those another time, probably another time, because that's a longer conversation. You mentioned anarchotropism. There are anarchotropic forces, and excuse me. But we won't get to those today. We have way too much to get to just for the archotropism. But this thing will come back because it's there. And you saw this in other and historical anarchies where they were dealing with this force, of nature one time after another. It just kept coming back and coming back and coming back until they said, fuck it, just give us a king.
Gotcha.
And both times, you've had two major, really major anarchies, what you could call anarchies. One was in the kind of medieval era of like Frisia, which is kind of like northern Germany. And the other one was like 3,500 years ago in ancient biblical Israel, which was a full-blown Anarcho Covenant. And the Frisia one had an element of democracy to it. So it wasn't quite it was a property rights-based democracy or anarchy. But, because it didn't really have a government, but it did. But anyway, it just wasn't very, very powerful at all. So it was more of a de facto anarchy, whereas the one in biblical Israel was a full-blown Anarcho Covenant, like a Hoppa-style Anarcho Covenant, and voluntarily agreed to and everything. So it's like, and both times you ended up with a lot of war and a lot of like warlords trying to take over and make themselves king. In Frisia, you ended up with wars that ended with one of the warlords getting to be king. And in the biblical Anarcho Covenant, basically they got invaded like 15 times in 400 years. 6 times they got successfully taken over. And by the end of it, they're like, fuck it, just give us a king. We can't do this. We can't be responsible enough to maintain our own anarchy. We can't, and we just want to outsource our liberty and our protection to a king who can, save us. And basically what I end up describing in this, in this framework, there are 6 laws, and basically what I'm describing is the how and the why. The what happens is this chaos order cycle. The why is the kind of these 6 laws.
All right. Well, then I will let you continue to guide me down on these 6 laws. So why don't we just keep diving right in? I don't want to distract too much from the main topic here, but I'll continue to butt in where I think we need clarification.
Sure, whatever. And you just interrupt me if you ever need to clarify anything. Okay. The first law of archotropism, is the value of power is relative, not absolute. Therefore, the value of power can neither be created nor destroyed. It may only be transferred from one wielder to another or transformed from one form into another. The sum total value of power is always conserved. Now, I think, this is where I've made a few mouth typos in my past appearances. I'm going to try to do better today.
Save the best for the Lions of Liberty appearance, of course.
Yeah. I've been trying to get better and better in my presentation. But I've been consistently, I will every now and then I will make a mistake where I say power is conserved. And like, no. It's not the power that is conserved. It's the value of power that is conserved. And you can kind of prove this to yourself logically when I say that it is the value is relative, not absolute. The reason for this is if you think of what the value of power is, it's basically the value of coercion, and the value of coercion is basically relative to your ability not to be coerced. If I'm going to be, if I'm going to be like a robber and on the, like a mugger on the street, and I'm going to walk up to Marc here and say, give me your wallet, and I'm pointing a knife at him, and basically if he has because I have a weapon, I'm more powerful than him. I can probably take him on, and he has an incentive to, like member pseudo demand. He has an incentive to, give me his wallet, and that's the value of me doing that to him. Now, on the
unless I pull out a gun and point it at you, and suddenly the value.
Bingo, and all of a sudden the knife ain't so great.
Right.
And because now there's a new weapon that's entered the game, now that value is pretty much negative. And I shouldn't have done this. And this was a terrible idea. And oh my God, please don't shoot me. And
so in that scenario, would that sort of mean like the value was transferred to me when we're looking at the power?
That's exactly what it was. In this scenario, the value is still it's percents of 100. So basically, when I had the knife, basically I would, let's say, I don't know if I could take you in a fist fight or a knife fight, but let's just say I could. Let's just say the split was like 80-20, because I don't know, maybe you could take me, maybe you could disarm me and take the knife and put it through my throat or whatever.
Okay.
And but now that you've pulled out that gun, it's like 99-1 you. It's like, I'm not going to be able to cross this distance in time for you to not like shoot me in the chest or something like that. I'm a dead man. So you can kind of, and this is like one of those like funky things about remember, how the left, because this is something that my father always taught me, is that, Andrew, you don't always need to reinvent the wheel. If you want to understand how to do something right, find someone who really knows what they're doing and just copy them. And so this is something, that when I was first kind of deriving these laws, I really, really took time to look at and study the left. Because like the left, they understand power and they have just a love for it. And when you love something, it means you really understand it. And so with the left, they would always say, just like, make these arguments that were saying like the value of economics or whatever was, like zero sum. They always had this zero sum fallacy. And that was what initially cued me into this, was that like, why is it that they always have this zero sum fallacy? Because they talk about inequality and stuff like that as if it's a problem. And, for any Austrian, or basically any, non-Marxist or whatever, we basically say, no, inequality is not a problem, because there's more than enough to go around. We just create, the market will just create more and more and more, and we'll all be fine. Everyone will get their fair share, get the, whatever share they need and can afford. And, it's not inequality that's the problem, it's the poverty that is the problem, and it's all the state's fault, et cetera, et cetera. But they would just be, the left would be so insistent that this inequality is a problem. And it never made sense to me until I realized that for the left, they're not talking about the economic value of wealth, or they're talking about the political value of wealth. Because if you understand that, basically all, you have two, basically I define power two kinds of way. One is the non-coercive power. This is anything you can possibly imagine that is non-coercive, non-political. Can be like market power. It can be, manpower. It can be, just wealth and money.
The wealth, power, and influence side of it, basically.
Yeah. Wealth, power, and influence. And anything that is non-coercive, I call that potential power. And anything that is coercive, I call that political. The unjustified power is something I call political power. And so if you are thinking of, by the way, this is why here, let me give you the example to kind of make this a little clearer. If you have, like, let's say you have 100 people in the room, and each one of them has a gun and like a sack of money. So each one of them, 100 people, each one is holding a sack of money and a gun. And so like what's the value of coercion for each of the people? Not much. Is really only because they each have like basically an equal share of the power. Now, if I were to double the amount of guns, so they each have 2 guns and a sack of money, then we could say, hey, the amount of wealth in the room has actually gone up, but the ability to coerce each other has basically stayed the same. Now, if I were to, let's say I'm going to, back to the 100 guns and 100 bags of money. If I, press a magic button and 99 of those guns disappear, and the 100 money bags still remain, that one gun just got a whole lot more valuable. And so basically, and in that case, you would say that because of the amount of guns in the room went down by 99, you would say, it's a major drop in wealth, because guns are wealth. But because of the, by the way, can you hear me correctly? I can't really hear myself in my.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yep, you're all good.
All right, no problem. Okay, so because the amount of wealth in the room just went down, but the power basically stayed the same, and that one gun just got a whole lot more valuable because that value of power is always conserved. And now I can point that gun at everybody and steal the money back because I'm basically gone in the room now because I'm the only one with a gun, and so that's so that's a weird way that. That power and wealth can actually move that economic value and political value can actually move in opposite directions. And so because when I say, remember Rothbard in Anatomy of the State, he made the point that, this kinetic power or political power, because it's predatory, it basically ends up, actually decreasing the amount of power in a system because you end up disincentivizing people to create more wealth. So if basically you have this, I consider what I call predation is the consumption of political power, because it ends up driving down the amount of power actually in the system. So even though the value will always stay the same, the amount of power in a system can go up and down and fluctuate, usually along with how wealthy the society is, because wealth, power, and influence, wealth and power are interchangeable. And same thing with like manpower. Manpower is, in terms of politics, is a consumable because, I can send that manpower off and go conquer or something like that. And, these are all forms of power or end up being, kind of consumable. And when and the only part of that, and this is something that it's a little, different because I can go from like, let's say we're have a regular non-coercive, and we can go from like, I have labor at my job that earns me money. I can turn around and use that money to buy food, which I then consume into myself. And basically, we just went from potential power to potential power to potential power. We never went to kinetic, basically because we went from manpower in the form of labor to wealth. It is a new kind of power. Then we went to from wealth, we went to food, which is like another kind of wealth. And then I ate that and that food went into my body. And now we're back to manpower. And we never went kinetic there. We never went predatory. And so when you're doing activities like that, the amount of power in a system doesn't drop. Even there, right there, the value is conserved because this is a non-predatory action. Now, again, if I go and I use like my gun to steal your food, then I've disincentivized you to do work or basically let's say you're the shopkeeper or that you're the farmer. I've disincentivized you to do your work because why should you do your work for somebody else's benefit? This is something Rothbard pointed out in Anatomy of the State. And so so let's see.
So would you say that type of power is basically? Politics is basically the mechanism through that type of coercive power sort of ebbs and flows through a society.
Yeah, basically I kind of liken this to it's kind of like a buffet, and the state is the one fat kid at the buffet that has a gun to keep all the other fat kids away. They're the one. They want a monopoly on the buffet of power, and this kind of gets us into the second law of Archotropism, which is very related. That power seeks consolidation from lower concentration to higher concentration. And predation, in quotes, is defined as the act of consolidating power. So basically what this means is that since power seeks consolidation from low concentration to high concentration, this is like the strong prey upon the weak. It's kind of no duh. But because the weak people, they don't have the ability. And what ends up happening with this is where you get into that perverse incentive of pseudo demand. Now, remember where we said that basically the weaker you are, the more a predator is going to want to prey on you. When the lions are going after the little gazelle, they don't want to go for like the big one that looks strong and fast. They want to go for like the weak one that may have broken its leg. You always want to go for the low hanging fruit because it's easier. It's less dangerous. It's like, do I want to, go after like the big, strong, it's like when I'm a robber, do I want to go, do I want to go after the cop or do I want to go after like the small 5 foot tall woman.
Sure.
Seems
obvious.
it's like, the cop is a known threat. It's like, I don't want to go after that guy. He can defend himself, and he'll just pull out his gun and handcuffs and be like, all right, surrender. It's like, no, it's like if I'm a criminal on the street. By the way, criminals and states, again, mafia pretending to be a human rights group. So it's like it works the same exact way, because these are both predatory acts. Now, basically what you get from this is that weakness invites aggression because of that, because the weaker you are relative to me, the more valuable that predation is, because there's a lower risk cost. And, if you have to, do like a cost analysis of, risk reward benefit, going after the weaker person is a much more, it's much less risky, and that's a much lower cost. Therefore, there is more value in going after the weak person than the strong person, and so if you have something like this is where I'm going to get, some libertarians upset at me. Hey, if you're a degenerate, you're making yourself a target. And remember, I'm not saying this is moral, but, this is in fact, the way the system works is that if you are going out and doing all of these acts like fornicating, taking out tons of debt, just being an alcoholic and a drug addict, and you're doing all of these things that make you weak, because let's say, hey, like how much can you fight off? Like, let's say you're a whole society of this. And, let's say, how much are you going to be, how easy is it going to be able to fight off a foreign invasion if your whole country is, is too debt ridden to fund a defensive military campaign, or from all the consumption you've been doing, or you're all too, drug addicted and alcoholic to be able to to fight a war profitably or effectively. Or you're too mentally ill because you never met your dad, and because your mother was a prostitute or something like that, or you were born out of wedlock, due to fornication or stuff like that, and your whole society is like that. You're not going to be cohesive enough, or organized enough, or powerful enough, strong enough to fight off a foreign invasion. And when you have
this is where we kind of, to me, like it's really just fascinating to me how this all sort of ties in, like to how this was, not to use the term, but the genesis of this for you is reading the Bible and kind of coming to these ideas. Mm-hmm. And in this context, because a lot of people look at the Bible and maybe the 10 Commandments and think, oh, this is just a bunch of moralizing Christians here. But when you look at it through the context that you're describing here, it's more like, no, they're just kind of telling you the things you should want to do to have a strong society so that you are not preyed upon.
Yeah. And basically what you saw in the book of Judges, which is the story of the Anarcho Covenant that lasted for on and off for about 400 years, is that whenever they were strong in their morality, that they never had problems. It was only that when they, basically forsook their morality, and they went with these Canaanite religions, which were just barbaric. Like, oh my God, you had like human sacrifice, child sacrifice, ritual bestiality, like rape as like a sacrament. And you went to you would go to war to, get captives to sacrifice them to your demon or whatever. And just had like one, effed up. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Oh yeah, please do.
Oh yeah. You just had one fucked up thing after another. And, in these Canaanite religions. And so when the Israelites start forsaking their religion, to go, worship these Canaanite gods, it's like, no fucking wonder they got invaded. Like, there's no way this is going to, give you a stable society. This is going to give you just mental illness and just sickness. It's like, there's no wonder they weren't able to fight off their invaders. No wonder they look like easy targets. And, you also see some other stuff in the Bible where, or I should say in the law where, this is one objection I'll get from atheists every now and then. And, every time I explain this to them, they never seem to get it. And if they do, they just want to be invincibly ignorant. It's like, we'll say like, oh, there were a whole bunch of, really bad things in that law. It's like, is your God evil or something like that? And, and basically you had like some times where, remember, these are barbarians. This is 3,500 years ago and 3,500 years more primitive. And so you had a lot of just beliefs in there. Remember, this is an Anarcho Covenant. There is no state to enforce morality. And there's no centralized police force or anything like that. This is all of these laws, they have to be enforced voluntarily, because the people are incentivized to enforce them. Basically, the only laws that really got enforced were like the property laws, and because people had incentives to enforce those. So what would end up happening is, you can make a law, like you could make a law that says, don't kill your kid, but they're like, I'm a barbarian. I believe I have a right to kill my kid. And so when basically when you have that attitude, you can make a law, but without police officers, it's basically a letter to Santa. The way Michael Malice said. So what the God of the the writer of the law would do would say that, all right. I get there's no police, and this law has to be enforced, basically voluntarily by self. So what he would do was he would try to set the bar slightly higher than whatever their barbarian beliefs were, just so he could kind of get them to be a little bit more civilized. It was a damage control mechanism, like with the there was a law that, hey, if you wanted to kill your kid, or kill your son, you had to give him a trial first. So like if your kid is mouthing off to you, you can't just kill him. You have to give him a fair trial where he can plead his case. And what that ended up doing was because the previous system had been you can kill either of your kids, male or female, and without a trial. And so he's like, okay, because I'm not going to be forced. I'm not going to be around to be the policeman. I'm just going to say, okay, you can't kill your daughters. That's not happening. We're not doing any honor killing. So we're getting rid of that entirely. And if your kid is like really violent and destructive or whatever, you at least have to give him a trial before you kill him. And so like something like that might have been really useful for that Parkland shooting kid, because this kid had the FBI called him like 40 something times. It's like a law like that might not have been so bad. But because like let's face it, a parent doesn't want to kill their kid, and but they think they have a right to, and hey, if there's no police to stop them or to retaliate, or basically to declare retaliatory force against them if they do something, because that's really what the police are here for, is vengeance as a service. Basically it's like, all right, well, let's just try to raise the bar a little bit so that to try to control the damage or make it slightly less. And you find one law after another like that in the Bible, where in the old covenant, where it's like, hey, there's this really, really barbaric belief and practice that these 3,500 years ago, Jews had about what their rights were, and the writer of the law is just like, okay, let's just try to make that a little bit less self-destructive, and let's
at least have an extra couple steps before you kill our kids.
Yeah, or it's like if you're basically they had another belief that was really bad, which was like, it's like, if we go to war with a neighboring nation or a neighboring state, and we come into a house and we kill all of the family except for the virgins, basically the practice back then was you raped her and you killed her, and that was the practice, and they believed that they had a right to do that, which was like, this is how barbaric these people were. And what the writer of the Old Covenant did was, okay, like, could you at least give her like 30 days to grieve and bury her family and grieve over that, and you have to marry her, so like you have to take responsibility for her for the rest of her life, and then you can rape her. It's like he's not condoning rape, obviously, and you see in other places where he says like, oh, and if you just like rape any woman, is a death penalty crime. So you see that in other places, and there is some confusion there where they say, the word rape is like, oh, you have to give her like a certain amount of money or you marry her. The reason that's a different word back then, they don't use that word the same way. That word back then means that you the word rape in 3,500 years ago, that word meant that, oh, you are going to pretend you're going to marry her to get her to sleep with you, and then you don't marry her. That was rape. It's like, that's a very different word. And that's why the punishment for that was, you either had to give her like a lot of money for that, or you had to marry her. That was why that was a much more reasonable, punishment for what rape meant back then. But this is 3,500 years later in like 4 different languages that we've been translated through. So it doesn't quite mean the same thing anymore.
Gotcha.
And And then atheists will throw that at me. I'm like, you fucking ignoramus. You have no idea, no clue what you're talking about. And rather than try to explain it to them, I just block them. So, so it's like my blocking policy is inspired.
It's one
by
of
mental
Andrew's
health.
laws.
Yeah, and so basically this, but we get back to the Jews where they would do all of these just barbaric acts that were far more barbaric than they already were, and therefore they lose their liberty because they lose the ability to fight off their invaders, and that's the main problem with these acts of degeneracy, is that they make you a target. And it's like, okay, maybe you have a right to partake of all of these things. And by the way, you did have that right under the Anarcho Covenant, like gambling, prostitution, what else? We have drugs. All of these things were completely legal under the Anarcho Covenant. Completely legal, not even regulated. And and it's like, you had a right to do them, but you're a fucking idiot if you do. You're just making yourself a target for the Canaanite neighbors who are not that friendly. And this happens over and over and over again until they're like, fuck it, we can't be responsible, just give us a king. And then God was like, no, you got to tell him this is going to be a really bad idea. He's going to do horrible things. He's going to be a bad tyrant, and he's going to put like a 10% tax on you. And basically, I know what your audience is thinking right now. Only 10? That sounds great.
That's exactly what I'm
Sign
thinking.
me up for
Sign
this
me
thing.
up right
This
now.
sounds great. It's like, have you seen the Democrats? They're pushing 90. He's a piker, not a tyrant. So.
All right, Andrew, we got some more laws to get through. So what laws next?
Yeah, and so basically you end up, because of this, we need to get moving on. Basically,
here I am. I was holding out hope we could still get to some of the solutions later, but I think we're still going to have to focus on the laws. I think you were right about that.
But basically, this is another, because remember that we have that archotropism order, chaos order power, chaos order power sequence. What ends up happening because whenever you create new wealth, you remember that all of this is always conserved, because if you create new wealth, you are creating new power. That devalues all of the previous power that was in existence. This is why the left has a incentive to burn their cities to the ground, because basically production, and they actually say this, where they say production is exploitation, where they say that because of this, because you've created new power, this is now power that is unconsolidated, and productivity ends up being predation against the left and against the state. Because you've devalued, kind of like inflation, you've devalued all of the previous amount of power in a system. And so, when you're trying to consolidate, from their perspective, they see being productive as being predatory against them. And, never mind.
Which explains why the rich are always under such ire, because if you're rich and you're powerful and you're not the state, then you're
creating new wealth that's not theirs.
Interesting.
And this is why they have an incentive to burn their own cities to the ground, because again, if everybody, you can get basically more powerful three ways. You can by yourself increase your own power just by being a stronger person or whatever. You can increase your network and bring a lot more people around you, or you can punish other people and bring them down in order to and build yourself up, because it basically whatever someone gains, another must lose, because this is a zero-sum game. So they can burn their cities to the ground and make everybody else so much poorer, but because they're still the state, they're still in charge, they are more powerful. And this is another perverse incentive that you will see the left and the state behave, because this is in their interest. And but the reason you don't see this all the time is because the third law of archotropism is that the economic power or the economic value of power is subjective. And this is where you get the, basically if it's subjective, that means it's subject to time preference. So in other words, the reason why a state typically won't, eat all of its predation or eat all of the wealth of society in just one big binge is that a predator has a incentive, based on time preference to kind of, spread out the predation over time, so he doesn't eat all of his meals, because basically he's not productive. This is something Rothbard also pointed out in Anatomy of State, is that they have an incentive not to eat their very last meal, not to consume everything lest they find out that was their last meal and there's nothing else to predate upon and they're going to die, and they don't want to do that. But basically you have something like you can have like a a high time preference for power, which is I really want to consume the potential power and turn it into kinetic power, political coercive power right now. And I can't wait, I can't defer it, and I gotta have this thing right now. And this is what you find with the left. The left has a very high time preference for power because they want to tend to over consume. This is what that ends up looking like. Because if they're, what you end up doing is because if you understand that, wealth basically is what creates hierarchy and stratification. If you're trying to overconsume and, the amount of wealth you're going to have in your society is going to come down. So you end up with a flatter and flatter hierarchy, which looks like equality. This is where they get that idea of equality from, as that being a good thing, because this means they're at maximum consumption. And but if you have like the right that does believe in hierarchy, they have a low time preference. This means they have a low time preference for power, where they're willing to defer quite a lot more of that predation, of that gratification from predation. In fact, they're willing to defer quite some forms of power and coercion entirely. Like they don't want to do a welfare state. We don't think that's a good thing, and so they're just defer that entirely. And again, we're speaking about broad groups, not the politicians themselves. That's a different story, and we'll get to that. But you have, and then your final group is libertarians, who basically want a zero or near zero consumption of political of power, because let's face it, we don't believe in coercion. We believe in the non-aggression principle. So therefore, they have a zero time preference for power. This is where you end up getting where we want hierarchy, but it has to be all voluntary, and that's the main thing, is that whatever, if you want equality or you want hierarchy or whatever you want, so long as it's voluntary, we don't have a problem with it. This is where you get that from, is that liberty and you can predict that these if you believe that left is equality, right is hierarchy, and libertarian is voluntary, I can say all three of those was just by just describing your time preference for power, or in terms of coercion, political power, and that's why I like this, those definitions a lot better. I use left, right, and libertarian differently. I use based on the time preference for power definition. Other people don't use it that way. They use it the other way I described, but my way predicts their way. So it's like, I really believe mine is better. And this is something that, you've probably seen this argument around, going around kind of post-libertarian Twitter, is that the Constitution, the reason we have this is, by the way, this time preference is why we have a big government today. Because basically, we didn't get a big government because the Constitution failed. We got a big government because it succeeded. Remember that Lysander Spooner quote that it's like, the big government today was either because the state allowed for, the Constitution allowed for it to happen, or it was unable to stop it. Right, in either case, it's unfit to exist. Right. But yeah, basically, I can say not only did the Constitution allow for that to happen, it guaranteed it, because basically what ended up happening. Then think of it kind of like you did an investment where you underconsumed, you saved money, and you invested it in appreciating assets. Basically, because of this low time, what the Constitution did, remember, it was a right-wing coup. And so what ended up happening was, it was as if they put it was two parts monarchy. The Constitution is two parts monarchy. This is the Supreme Court and the executive, and one part a republic. That's a higher time preference for a version of power. So basically, you had two-thirds of it is a low time preference for power, and 1/3 of it is a high time preference for power, a type of government. Yeah, this is something Hoppe talked about a lot. Hans Hermann Hoppe talked about a lot, that monarchy is a much lower time preference form of government. So what ended up happening is they ended up almost like, it was as if they imagine that power has an interest rate the way like wealth has an interest rate. Again, these two are interchangeable. And imagine that you put a high interest rate, artificially high interest rate on the on the amount of wealth. What would happen is that you would get a crap load of savings, because the market isn't able to properly clear between the amount of savers and the amount of debt, consumers in terms of debt. So what happened was the Constitution basically put an artificial price floor on the interest rate of power. and they made it so that the reptiles that rule us, for a long time, they had to basically underconsume because they save up their power and never use it, and because of that, this is what underconsumption looks like. Basically, you'll get because you have bigger and you're leaving more wealth for the people to be productive with. What ends up happening, you'll get more and more and more and more wealth. And eventually, when the reptiles finally are able to break the constitutional restraints, there's all of that wealth just sitting there waiting to be, consumed. And this is what two world wars looks like. And because you see this again with, kind of remember, there's all this comparison of the United States to Rome. And with Rome in their first 230 years, remember that, political power is the coercive and violent kind. And where Rome was like a pure republic, that, in their first 230 years, they had like 26 civil wars. We got away with one. And basically that's another easy way you can kind of prove to yourself quickly that the Constitution was in fact working, because if we were a normal republic, we would look a lot more like Rome. By the way, 26 was the number of civil wars. That doesn't count the external wars, which we have plenty of those too. We have plenty of those. We weren't better in Rome on that front.
Yeah,
but
I think we're competing pretty well there.
Yeah, in terms of civil wars, we did a lot better. And when you had real unrestricted democracy that emerged in Europe, remember, so in Europe you had like 1,500 years of like real hardcore power accumulation under Christian monarchy. Christianity being the lowest time preference religion, basically, store up all your treasures in heaven. In practice, what that means is either give them to church in terms of charity, or give them to your children, and let your children be productive or whatever with them. That's what that means in practice. So it means you end up saving a crap ton of money with your, and your low time preference government of monarchy is also very low time preference, because, it's, one king, how much can he do? It's like, how much can he really consume? Not much. Robert Baratheon, king of the Andals and all that, or whatever, he can only go through so many hookers and booze in one day. It's like, and frankly, if you run an excellent hookers and booze company, he's going to be your best customer. So you might, yay, capitalism. So it's like, this might actually work out for you. It's like, but he's one guy. How much can he do? How much damage can he really do? And so you when you finally had 1,500, you had like 1,500 years of that, post Rome, because Rome was a shit show. And you finally get to like the 20th century, where it's like, okay, they're like, all right, so we've had a really great time with this Christian monarchy thing. How about we just ruin all the progress, institute regular old democracy or republics, and don't bother restraining them at all, and just see what happens. Well, what that looks like is two world wars, because this was unrestrained republican democracy. That was binging on 1,500 years of power accumulation. This is what two world wars looks like, and this is why we got them so quickly, and because literally we just got democracy, and then like within a generation, it's like, all right, boom, two world wars, hundreds of millions of people dead.
All right, guys, before we wrap up here, I got to let you know about one of our great sponsors, our longtime sponsors at Lorenzotti, Italy. If you are a fan of coffee, if you like a nice fresh cup of joe to wake up in the morning, as I do, you're going to want to check out our friends at Lorenzotti, Italy. They deliver fine, premium Italian coffees right to your door in these nice little tins that look so wonderful sitting on your counter there. And if that weren't all enough, these guys are great libertarians. They are Patreon supporters of this show. They are absolutely worthy of your support. If that all wasn't enough, these guys do more than just sell coffee. They also help other entrepreneurs set up their own coffee businesses, help them acquire equipment, acquire financing, everything they need to start their own coffee business, start their own coffee shops. So you definitely want to check them out for that reason, if that's something that's been on your mind. Either way, just fantastic people at Lorenzotti, Italy. Amazing people, fantastic people. You'll want to support them if you're fans of the show. Heck, even if you're not, if you're listening to this by accident, check them out anyway. They have great coffee. Lorenzotti, Italy. You can find them at lorenzotti.coffee. That's LORENZOTTI.coffee. And you do not want to forget your Lions of Liberty listener discount. Just use discount code ROAR for 10% off your order.
It's really fascinating when you look at all this through these sort of engineering thermodynamics concepts that you integrate here. Just the idea of building up this energy, building up this energy, building up this energy. Well, there's going to be an explosion. The energy's got to go somewhere. So that's kind of, I think, kind of what you're saying applies here.
Eventually, that price floor on the interest rate of power breaks. And then you're like, all right, full consumption time.
Right.
And this is what democracy, I call this little d democracy, very, very little d. These people, it's a dick joke. Anyway, so anyway, what it kind of led up to that, this is getting into the fourth law, which is that, we actually have a formula for power here that it's force over distance and time. And basically, what that says is you have to actually be physically present, at the distance to apply the force to people. Like I can't just threaten you over my, I can't have my gun here and threaten you when you're in California. I can't threaten you across the internet. That's not going to work. I have to be physically present with my gun to actually threaten you with it. So I actually have to be able to go the distance to apply the force. And this, what this does is it brings us into the physical plane where by the way, this is where you're slightly different than thermodynamics. And a lot of these, they're very close to thermodynamics, but not quite the same. And you'll see that a few times. I didn't point them out, but this is one time I will, where, that basically because what we're trying to say with this fourth law is that logistics is a bitch. Logistics is a cost to power, that, you actually have to be able to go the distance. Like you can't drive a tank over a mountain. Like it just can't work. You have to find a mountain pass. So if there's a physical or geographical barrier in the way preventing you from applying the force, you effectively have zero power. It's as if you have zero power. And this is why you'll see a lot of states, they will try to make their borders around, geographic landmarks that, try to separate them from other nations, because this, is actually security for them, because it's difficult for each of them. Like if you have a mountain range, it's tough for a state to bring their forces over the mountain range to physically attack, whatever state is on the other side of the mountain range. This is why you'll see typically on two sides of a mountain, you will see different states. And because they physically can't get to each other. That's the reason why. If they can get to each other, they feel insecure. And if you feel insecure, and if the state feels insecure, this is this thing that's going to make them very violent. They don't like it when there's another state right next to them then there's nothing separating them. They get very, very antsy because these are people who are paranoid about power and especially losing their power. They love it. They want it. They never want to give it up, and they will die before they do. So what ends up happening is that, a lot of times you'll have consolidation around these geographical borders. And if they can't consolidate, this is when you get perpetual warfare. And what ended up happening in the 20th century was that because this was the end of the age of empires, where you had all of these trade routes that were going all around the world and crisscrossing each other, this is what was making them so incredibly antsy. And this is what, and then, when they're all on high alert because, again, they don't like it when another state can just get to them. And they'll be like, no, this is my trade route. No, that's my trade route. No, you're crossing mine. No, stay out of my territory or my territorial waters, et cetera, et cetera. They're all going to get very, very, upset about that because they feel threatened. And eventually that, now that you finally instituted democracy, is all right, time for war. And because I feel threatened by you, and because you're able to come into my waters and, you could be potentially applying force to me. You haven't yet, but you could, and that's more than enough for me to be frightened. And because I'm a paranoid statesman. And so basically World War I erupts, and why only stop there? If you can have, if there's anything about democracy, you can do bad things bigger, better, and twice. So we get a second one. And what ended up happening, at the end of the Second World War, America and Russia were kind of looking at each other like, oh, this is not good, because we had as Americans, we had literally just watched the Red Army, just rape and pillage its way across northern Germany. And we're like, oh, we don't want to fight this, because we were shaping up for World War III. And so what we did was we got all of the other combatants from Europe in a room. We took them to a nice golf resort called Bretton Woods, And we said that, okay, we're going to do the thing you do whenever you go to a business meeting at a nice resort. Instead of enjoying the nice resort, you put everyone inside in a dark room and you lock the door and you don't let anybody out until you got what you wanted.
And now everyone wants to make a deal.
Yeah. And so basically what we did was we brought all the allies together and we said, all right, so we know that you just got done shooting at each other and we're going to need you all to be on the same side now, our side, because we want you not in front, not beside us, not behind us, but in front of us, in between us and the Soviets. You're going to be the human shield. And to do that, we're going to give you this Marshall Plan, which is like an explicit. We're bribing you to be on our team, and so basically
those bribes continue to this day.
Yep, pretty much. And then but they were like, this is not a good enough deal. You're asking us to be human shields, and you're only giving us like a Marshall Plan amount of money. And so, and then we said, okay, so we're going to try something new called free trade. And we're going to be like, okay, since all of your navies are at the bottom of the ocean now, and ours is the only one to survive survive World War II, we're going to patrol the entire global oceans, with our navy and give free trade for everybody. So there are no crisscrossing empires to make anybody uncomfortable. And we're going to guarantee free trade for everybody. And at our expense, we're going to pay the security cost to everybody, for everybody. And this is why we've never been able to say no to a war in the past 80-ish years, because basically this is the bribe. We bribe them with a free trade for all that's free to them in the sense that they don't have to pay the security cost. We do, and they because that was kind of what led up to it, where they all thought they had to pay their own security costs beforehand. And now that America got, but now we kind of, got away with that, because now we said, okay, you're all on the same team now, our team, and we're going to provide security for you as a service. And this way you can, go out, send your trade ship to go get whatever raw commodity you want, bring it back home, metabolize it into a product, and then trade it on the international market for hard currency. That was the second part of the bribe, to be for us against but you had to be on our team against the Soviets. So whenever
this puts a little more context on. I mean, I remember there was just a huge uproar when Trump even suggested that we pay a little less to some of these countries, and people are thinking, well, yeah, a lot of people, like maybe of our point of view or the right in general, might say like, well, of course they can pay. These are rich countries, they do well, they can pay for their own whatever. But it's not really about what they can do; it's about this power dynamic.
Yep, and this is why we never integrated our economy with the wider world. Is that because then it's not going to be a bribe, because then we're just going to dominate too. And the idea was to let them dominate, and pretend as if America had lost the entire war, and therefore they could rebuild their economies and feel comfortable standing in between us and the Soviet Union. And then when in the 90s, when the Soviet Union kind of just went bankrupt and died, it's like we don't have a reason for this thing anymore, because this thing was never about economics for us. The empire was never about economic value for us. It was about security. And now there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. So this thing's been kind of running on fumes for the last 30 years. And, so when Trump finally comes along, this was the incentive all along, is that, when he says that, hey, these trade deals are not working out in our favor, he's right, because we're paying for everybody else's security and we're not getting any extra benefit for it. And this is, and basically I think it's the four, he's made like four so far-ish with like four other countries. Great Britain is on the way. That trade deal is on the way. And but basically, when America makes a trade deal with you, that what we're saying is, okay, our military is one of the bargaining chips on the table, and what are you going to give us for it? And basically, our part of the deal is, okay, we're going to open up our market. You're going to open up your market a little bit more, because we're going to provide you extra security in the form of our Navy, which has like 30 times the firepower of all of the other navies combined, most of which are allies. And so it's like this is like basically free security for you. You don't have to pay for your own security, and because we've already paid for that. So when Trump comes along and he wants to destroy the free trade system that has guaranteed peace and prosperity for all the countries around the world except for America, because we're the security guy, we're the policeman of the world, which we agreed to be. Everyone's going to freak out, and Angela Merkel came in later, and she was like tried to explain to Trump, like, don't you understand that what you're suggesting is literally the death of my country? Because, European history is, like all about, is Germany strong or is Germany weak? Because if Germany's strong, then you get a pan-European alliance that comes and tries to take it down and wants to put a bunch of knives in its back. And so she's like, this is the death of my country. He's like, I don't really care. It's not my problem. And so basically that's where we are now. We don't have a trade deal with Europe. They're on their own. We don't have a trade deal in the Middle East. They're on their own. When you had, that the Iranians came in and said, okay, or the Houthi rebels, they bombed that refinery in Saudi Arabia, and then King MBS called it Trump's like, what, if Reagan was in office, you would have nuked Tehran already. It's like, I don't really care. This sounds like your problem, not mine.
So you think Trump, in some ways, instinctually, probably not in this engineering way that you are looking at it, but maybe as more of an instinct thing, he understood some of this power dynamic, and then he can see this doesn't benefit us. Also, we shouldn't do it this way, and he's not looking at it from the moral point, and neither are you in this particular aspect. I'm sure you have your own moral viewpoint about it, but he was looking at it through this similar power dynamic, even if not with equations and thermodynamics and such.
Yeah, well, what it is that, the incentive is there, and people will find a reason, to basically to behave on the incentive. So that this thing had been there. America doesn't give a shit about the rest of the world. We never have. We never. We basically had to be lied into both world wars and all of the wars after that too. And we just don't give a shit. We don't give a shit. We have a continent-sized economy. We don't need to go to war to get anything. We can produce everything we want by ourselves. We don't need to import anything. And it's like, I mean, need, as in we can't physically do this by ourselves. It's not, and we can do everything by ourselves. We don't need everybody else. So we've never cared about it. Most of our trade is with Canada and Mexico, mostly Mexico, and. It's like, we just trade with them. That's it. That's about it. But we don't need this entire system that we've been paying for a long, long, long time. So the incentive is there. And, Trump found a reason. It doesn't matter if it was a good reason or a bad reason. What matters is the incentive was there. And now this is a prediction I've made twice now. I'm going to make it again. Because Trump destroyed the global free trade system, America probably isn't going to be in any wars for that much longer, and we're kind we've had like 2 opportunities so far, to really go to war, and we didn't take them because it's like it's not in our interest anymore. We don't care about the global system. Biden still probably cares about it a little bit, and because what the ruling class has been trying to do with this extremism for the last 30 years is try to find a replacement for the Soviet Union to have all Americans united. The problem is that they're not figuring it out. Radical Islamic extremism just doesn't do it for us anymore. And now you have to say white nationalism, but people are already kind of onto it. Oh, that this is all bullshit and we don't really care. This isn't going to do it for us.
And people like Biden are kind of like, the last real holdovers from, I think he was probably in the Senate during the Cold War. They are real holdovers to that mentality. So yeah, they're carrying it over, but the incentives have changed. So it's much less likely, even with someone at the head of it that might have that sort of mindset, because the incentives have changed. They were much less likely for that to see that scenario playing out.
Yeah. And, move on, basically. And I kind of, the reason I kind of predict that I don't think Biden's going to start a war either. It's like, and again, this could go, it's more of a 50-50. It's not.
We all want you to be right.
Yeah. I don't want to be right, but
I think we do want you to be right in this case.
Yeah. It's like the reasons that he's kind of accepted all of Trump's trade deals, and the reason we know that is he put, instead of putting up a negotiator for the trade rep, and what he did was he put up a litigator. For the trade representative. That means that all we care about now is just enforcing the explicit trade deals that we have. And that's why you put a litigator in there. By the way, it's a litigator from Taiwan. And you can bet the Chinese Communist Party felt really, really anxious over that. So but let's move on, because we basically said, okay, this is the end of the Bretton Woods order. And what ends up happening, this is the 5th law of Archotropism. It's basically the 2nd law of thermodynamics, where you end up with the, in a closed system, all power is subject to entropy, in parentheses, chaos, and tends toward decay. So what ends up ends up being why you see like a 4 turning cycle. Kind of remember this like hard times create strong men create
Right.
good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times, and then the cycle repeats. Well, there's another.
I think we're right in the weak men about to create hard times.
Oh
part of
yeah.
that.
Oh, we got plenty of weak men right now. They're all
Yeah.
pussies.
See 'em all around me.
And this is why, and being a pussy, remember, invites aggression. So this is like,
Interesting.
this is where that's coming from. And so anyway,
That's got to be a T-shirt. Being a pussy invites aggression. Follow.
yeah, this
popular
is why
liberty.
you're this is why you're the one. The weird kid with no friends is the one who gets picked on because he has no friends to back him up,
Right.
and he's kind of a social out. He's a weirdo and an outcast. He's the target. That's not saying it's a good thing, but I'm just saying this is why.
Sure,
that
it's like you said earlier. It's no different from the woman alone walking down the dark alley is much more likely to get attacked than the three dudes walking together down that very same alley.
Yeah, or the cop.
Right.
The cop cars. It's just not going to happen. You stay away from that. But you see this overturning cycle because any power structure. Remember, all power is basically institutional. And this is another incentive of the first law I didn't mention is that because power is basically relative, and that's why it tends towards monopoly because it has less value for each of us if we fight each other, but it has more value if we decide to work together. So basically, it's not that you will always see that try to consolidate into power unless you have just one who's just such an asshole that he can't be reasoned with. And eventually you get one of those who thinks I'm in charge. I can't be reasoned with. I'm not going to work together with anybody. And this is what, and when he meets another guy like that, well, that's when you get war. Mm-hmm. But until then, if you have people who are just willing to work together, and because that is what is more valuable, this is why you see, based on geography, again, with the fourth law, states tend toward monopoly. The hierarchies, that emerge to try to extract that value of power, they tend towards monopoly because it's far more their efforts are far more profitable together than they are competitively. And this is why you're stupid if you're a criminal. You should just if you want to rob people, just join the IRS. It's like there's only the ultra high.
Yeah, but then you don't get to keep the winnings. So if you're just
that you get to keep some of it. I mean, those auditors make tons of money. Or you could just be a cop and have what was it that thing where you can take property from drug dealers. I'm blanking on the name.
Oh, civil asset forfeiture. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah,
from
you just
drug dealers or anyone you suspect of being a drug dealer in quotes, which means anyone with some cash.
Yeah, anyone at all. If you want to just rob people, just go be a cop.
Oh, you got 50 grand? You're probably dealing drugs. That's mine now. End of story.
Exactly. Or you could be the cop dealing drugs. No problem. Or you could be, and by cop, I mean the CIA. You could be the CIA drug dealer.
Right.
It's like, that's exactly what this is. This thing's a fucking monopoly. And if you are so high time preference and so stupid that, you can't join the monopoly on criminality, you want to be a private criminal. Well, we're not, I'm sorry. You kind of get what's coming to you because there's this entire group that was there for that and would have gladly accepted you as among their ranks. And, but anyway, anytime you have a hierarchy for power or any sort of institution for it, this is what, a state is an institution or a hierarchy for power. So anytime you get one of those that comes up, because basically what happens with the first law is that you have each generation, once you get one of these people in there that's like, I'm never giving up my power, kind of like a Democrat, they will die in office before they give up their power. And this is a feature you see at the left who has a really high time preference for power. The right doesn't quite have it. We will have people resign all the time, and it's a problem. Like in 2018, we lost like 40 something seats. All 40 basically were seats where a Republican incumbent had retired. And because this is a problem with low time preference Republicans and low time preference people is that they get tired of being in power. It sucks. But anyway, that's a different story. But every now and then when you get these people in there who just will not give up power, whatever it takes, therefore so they only give it up in death. And this is when it ends up, when that value, remember, value is always conserved. That's when the value actually gets transferred from one wielder to another is in death. and this is why, so every now and then when you have like one generation dies off, that is when that power gets handed down to the next generation under them. And so what will happen with this, you probably heard of the fourth turning cycle, where this is again you get the hard times that where the reason that ends up occurring is that as you get a brand new order that is designed for the people it fits right then. And this is, for them at that time. So then as that generation, starts dying off and starts handing down that power, that system was not designed for the next generation that came through it. But, they can make a few tinkers and modifications because they still have a lot in common with the generation that came before them. And then that happens with the next generation, and then the next generation. And then you're looking at and finally at the fourth generation, you're looking at a system that has so many tweaks and changes that it doesn't work for anybody. And so we're like, fuck this thing, let's get rid of, it just doesn't work at all for anybody. So let's abolish it, get rid of it. And we're going to, get a strong man to come in and just, basically destroy our Constitution and give us a new one, because we've had like 3 of them so far. Informally, we've only had 1. Informally, we've had about 3. And this is why we say that the Constitution we have right now just really isn't in effect.
I know we don't want to get tangent too much because we got another law to get to, but
Yep.
Can you just clarify what those other 2, what you see as the other 2 constitutions are?
The one was like Lincoln was the first strongman who basically destroyed the first Constitution, but had been in effect for about 80 years at that time. But he did that with the Civil War because, basically the one he destroyed was the one that said, okay, this is a compact and you're allowed to leave if you really want to. Right. And we're not doing that. It turns out we're not going to let you do that. We're destroying that part, and we're having this new thing where you're not allowed to leave. And oh, by the way, we're going to take a whole bunch of your property. We're going to free all the slaves and all this other crap that okay, the slave part was a good one. He kind of redeemed himself with right there, but everything else was just horrible. You can hear about that from somebody else. But
we can do multiple podcasts about that, as I have done in the past. So
yeah, and then but he didn't get to complete the act, and this is why because John Wilkes Booth shot him in the head. So basically, that was when we talked about this price for it. It ended up getting put back because Lincoln probably would have gone on to do a lot more damage. Like he had already suspended habeas corpus, ended free speech. He had printed a crap ton of money, which we didn't even have a central bank back then. And he gave us the first fiat, the greenback, and which ended like basically the Constitution says only gold and silver. And he had done all these things to just just destroy the Constitution in order to keep the Union together. But because John Wilkes Booth shot him in the head, he never got to really take it to its logical conclusion, and he got short-circuited. So we kind of got a little bit lucky there. And the price floor ended up getting put back, where we ended up having to kind of go back to a gold standard, free speech return, and all that stuff. Except now you just weren't allowed to leave anymore, and slavery wasn't a thing. So one bad thing, one good thing. I'll take it. And then you get to the next one, which was FDR, and he kind of had help from Woodrow Wilson, and basically he was the one who suspended the that second Constitution and with the New Deal, and he basically kind of just wiped his butt with it. And we have all of the everything since then from the progressive era is just all completely against the Constitution. But whatever, we're still doing it anyway. Social Security and welfare and all that crap is still here. Mm-hmm. So basically we're on our third informal Constitution right now. And but what ends up happening, again, you have this every single system you get. And by the way, this is we have Bretton Woods now, which has it served its purpose, and and now it's been modified and modified and modified. It wasn't working for anybody anymore, and the whole reason we had it, the Soviet Union, is just gone. So now it's an order begging to be destroyed. The incentive was there for Trump to come along and destroy it, and now we're kind of waiting for another strong man because basically Trump got interrupted. He was the Julius got betrayed by his party. By the way, Julius Caesar from the Party Populares for populist. He got betrayed by his own party, and then when he was fighting, basically Julius Caesar fighting Marc Antony and the armies of Cleopatra. Cleopatra kind of slept her way into the halls of power of Rome, not unlike Kamala Harris, I'm just saying it's like the story is kind of playing itself out. And the next part of that story is when Augustus comes in, kicks everyone's ass and consolidates power and into a real formal empire. And I think that's that's probably in our future. This Rome analogy has been really working out great for us so far. So I think we're about ready for that strong man to come in and create good times. And
it does seem that is That is the direction things will go,
And-
especially with how much wokeism is taking over. That's bound to create a reaction that will have popular support.
And
that
thank you-
I actually
thank
fear
you.
the reaction to wokeism more than the wokeism myself.
And thank you for that segue, because this is the sixth law of archotropism, that basically an overreaction from one side demands an overreaction from the other side.
Oh,
And
there
this
you
is
go.
kind of where you get that. Remember, like I think it's the third law, where it's like, one action demands an equal and opposite reaction. And so basically, this is what, where you have an overreaction demands another overreaction from the opposite direction. And you see this kind of, because remember, you kind of have like a middle preference for people. You see this in elections a lot, where the people kind of have a middle preference for power. That's not zero, and like the libertarians want them to have. It's somewhere in the middle between low and high. And this is why, whenever one party, wins, they'll let them wins power. Usually the next election, they'll lose part of that power because people want something kind of in the middle.
Mhm.
And but you'll see, like, if you have like the right really overreaches, like they kind of did in the 90s, just for on and on for about a decade, then that's going to get followed up by the left overreaching for about a decade. That's the last decade of hell that we've had, and where it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And now people are like, "Fuck you, we're going way back." And this is kind of why we got Trump in the first place. And the left just didn't learn the lesson, and they kept overreaching even more. And now this is why, again, I think we're going to see an Augustus Octavian from the right come along, and really give us a much more right-wing order. And you see this, and you see this on kind of the micro scale too. When you have like a overbearing right-wing father, they will tend to have a very kind of degenerate libertine kids who are just like, they're reacting to that. And you see exactly the opposite, where if you have it's not always, not guaranteed, but if you have like a parent who's like really laissez-faire and lax and just gives their kid no structure, a lot of times those kids will have a reaction to that, and they'll really want some structure.
Yeah. Or you get parents that drink a lot and their kids are like, I don't want to touch that stuff. Or vice versa. Like, my parents didn't drink at all. I don't think I ever saw them drink. I got to college, I was like, hey, it's on. I'm going to try that thing that I never seen even happen once. So
exactly. But you also see it at the very large macro scale, where if you have remember for Rome, we had a real basically overreaction from the left, where you had the Roman Republic just was horrible. And finally it just couldn't sustain itself any longer, and it just went bankrupt. And it kind of degenerated down into right-wing Christian monarchy, which was like the furthest right we've ever been. And that lasted for like 1,500 years. So imagine imagine you had to suffer the real hardcore Christian right for 1,500 years. But maybe by the 20th century, you're finally like, oh, thank God we finally got democracy here, and we can start making the shit show we've always wanted. And you start getting the progressive era, and you get all of the socialism and everything like that. And then and that's the overreaction from the left. And then, so we're finally, oh my God, okay, no more two world wars. All right, let's get a more Bretton Woods order where America is the hegemon of the planet. And which is, kind of like, this is an empire. We're back to the right wing thing. And now that we've gotten sick and tired of being an empire and being basically a monarch, America is the monarch of the earth. This is another thing where like libertarians will say that, all of the other states, they live in anarchy. Well, no, they don't. They live in like statism. America.
Yeah, that's the Walter Block kind of theory.
Yeah.
They all live in anarchy.
Basically, the U.S. is the state of states. And, this is not anarchy. This is statism. And, now this overreaction kind of from the right, is now broken down, and we're probably going to go back to on kind of the macro timeline, we'll probably go back to the left. But for America, because we just got done with an overreach from the left, we're about to go back from an overreach from the right, and you see cycles and cycles and cycles. You see this thing as kind of like as above, so below. You can see it all the way down at like just the micro family level, and you can see it all the way up at the multi-thousand year generational level. And and that's the sixth law of archotropism. Oh my God, I got it done in an hour 30.
You did it. I think you did it. Yeah, we started a few minutes late, so you did it. That was your big challenge, to try to get through the whole thing in under 90 minutes. So you have
I've been
succeeded,
practicing,
Andrew.
man.
Well, Andrew, I am someone, I don't know. I don't have the engineering mindset, but I have like the engineering curiosity, you might say. Like, I'm interested in high level concepts like this. I don't have the kind of mindset that gets me to them. So I'm hoping that people that listen to this, hopefully some of my questions help clarify some things. But like I said, like, my gut instinct is to say, so Andrew, what do we do next? But I agree with you. I think we got to save that for another time, another show, a part 2. Let people absorb this concept. And I'm sure you'd be open to this. I don't want to ask you, on the spot, but I'm going to. I'm sure you'd be willing to maybe do like an AMA, maybe for the Patreon people, if we get a bunch of questions in here after people absorb this interview, really take it in and really think about these concepts. So maybe we can bring you back to do that, either for the Pride, or maybe we'll do a public show. We'll see. But I definitely do want to follow up with you on, now that we've laid this idea out, now that we've laid out all the laws here of archotropism, now what do we do? I know you have a lot of ideas about that, so that'll be the next step. Of course, anyone that wants to take that step themselves, you've already been doing a bunch of videos about this stuff, of course, over Unpopular Liberty, so feel free to I feel silly in 2021 when I ask guests, like, tell people how to find it, because my guests are really smart. They know you go to YouTube and you type it, but whatever, just in case, tell everybody how they can find everything you're doing at Popular Liberty.
If you want to find me, I'm at Popular Liberty _ on Twitter. I'm at Popular Space Liberty on YouTube. You can find all of my podcasts and stuff at regular Popular Space Liberty on like Spotify, iTunes, and stuff like that. And you can find me. I'm trying to get more writing done, because a lot of people have been asking me to write about this stuff. And I have a Substack called Anti-Libertarian at Substack.com.
That's gonna get the trolls out quick.
Oh yeah,
or you're the troll, maybe in this case.
I named that perfectly because this will tell me who's read it and who hasn't. That basically the kind of libertarianism I'm kind of trying to put forward based on this archotropism framework is with a we've had heroic libertarians with heroic virtues in the past. Like Ron Paul, he's a hero archetype, and I think we need something more like an anti-hero archetype. And this where I say, like, libertarian is to anti-libertarian the way a hero is to an anti-hero. But if you're just seeing anti-libertarian and you just don't want, and you haven't read it, and I can tell it.
We're gonna read the blog from the guy that's called the anti-libertarian. Yeah. Some libertarian he must be. I can see the comments now.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's like I can tell immediately who's read the blog and who hasn't, because that's like literally in the blog description is that syllogism right there. So that's where you can find my writings. I'm trying to do a little more writing about why degeneracy causes weakness, and you can't have degeneracy and an anarchy, because that's going to cause it to fail. That makes it.
What about just a little degeneracy, just a tiny bit?
No, just like a tiny target on your back instead of a big one.
There you go.
And
I can handle a tiny target, I think.
And the final thought I'll leave the Pride with is, hey, remember that my first 2 assumptions is that statecraft is profitable. We kind of saw this last year, where it was like $10 trillion of profit from statecraft and aggression. So aggression is profitable. That's the incentive. That's why it's going to get done. And hierarchy is inevitable. So therefore, you're going to get a hierarchy for aggression as inevitable. What do you do about it? It's like this is the post-libertarian question that you've had Matt Erickson on as well, and other guys. This is what we're trying to answer: is that that these states are basically inevitable for those 2 reasons. What do you do?
All right. Well, that is a question that I know you and others and I will all be exploring in the coming, who knows how long, maybe the rest of our lives. We'll see. It is interesting to me that you're kind of the conjunction between several things here, because you are sort of, part of this, I guess, post-libertarian group of people that's kind of saying, what do we do now? How do we tackle these problems? How do we deal with like the facts as we see them? Or in your case, how do we deal with, okay, I've uncovered, you might say, these laws of archotropism. Now, how do we act? And a lot of those people in that circle are criticizing the Dave Smith Mises Caucus approach to act in that way. Whereas, and you probably would have the similar criticisms. But you're also the admin of the inner circle and a big fan of Dave Smith. So I think maybe you're the perfect person here to really bridge the divide between
the mastermind.
Yes. Well, Andrew, it's been awesome talking to you. Awesome to dive into this concept more. I would tell everyone, listen to this. If you're still wrapped around your head a little bit, maybe go listen to your interview with Pete. Maybe the two of them together can really help people solidify this concept. And I'm absolutely interested in having you back on and dig into this a little further and seeing where we go from here. So, Andrew, keep up the great work. You're doing great stuff over on Popular Liberty. So keep it up. Keep on roaring.
Yep. Oh, roaring like Scar.
It all circles back.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.
Marc. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been
You
great.
got it, man. It was a blast.
Love to come back soon. Take care, man.
Cool, brother. So this will actually drop probably a week from Monday. I'm going to record like a live show tonight that's going to be probably more time relevant. So I'll probably run that Monday. So cool, but it'll live in the pride, and I'll try to post it up for the Patreon ahead of time and all that.
All right.
Yeah, we'll definitely circle back to this. This is definitely something we'll be exploring. I'm interested in all these conversations that are not the same old boring. How would an anarcho-capitalist society deal with XYZ? I'm over those. I did that for like 7 years.
By the way, there is a special treat for the Pride out there. If you want to go to Adam Patrick's podcast, I did an analysis of the anarchy-minarchy debate from the Archotropism perspective that Michael Malice had with Yaron Brook on Lex Friedman's show. And so that's a 2-hour analysis from the
a 2-hour podcast about a 3-hour podcast. So if you got 5 hours,
well, the anarchy portion was only like 50 minutes, and I spent not much time. It was a 2-hour podcast, really about like 30 minutes of that was relevant. So
that's over on Adam Patrick's podcast. His podcast is You're Talking Over Me. So I'm thrilled to have guys that I've really come to enjoy the kind of things that they're exploring in the podcast world come in and support the Pride. It really makes me feel like, all right, we must be doing something right if these guys who I've just discovered, I mean, the two of you in probably the last 6 months or so, if I think that these great minds think we're doing a good job, then maybe we've been doing a decent job. So great. We'll keep it up.
Yeah, well, hey, I loved you. Thank you for giving me your platform. I really appreciate it. I hope the Pride is very well entertained by it.
Good stuff, brother. All right, man. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Peace. Have a good one.
Live long and live free.